Trying to get back on my diet.
All right.
All right, yeah.
So Lord, we're grateful for tonight, for how you've gathered us.
Yeah, Russell lives right next to us.
I think I left off last week with the resurrection and seeing the Trinity in the resurrection, and I did manage to look up those passages. So Jesus takes credit for the resurrection in John chapter 10. That's what we were reading last week. God the Father is given credit for the resurrection in Acts chapter 2 and chapter 3 many times. And the Holy Spirit is given credit for the resurrection in Romans 8, verse 11. So those were the passages I was thinking about when I was thinking, hey, the entire Trinity is so pleased with the work of the resurrection that they all want to take credit, take part in that. I think I just let Joe in, but okay. All right. Next week will be the lovely wife of Joe Braun, Gretchen Braun. If all goes well and God willing, she'll be here, and she had something she really wanted to share with us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that is a wow.
And hey, Joe's on. Yeah, good. Greetings to you, Joe. Yeah.
Hello, Jeffrey.
Yeah. Hi, Joe.
Hello, Peter.
Hi, I'm Carl.
Hi, I'm Joe.
All right. Exodus chapter 4. In Hebrews, the book of Exodus is actually named Shemot, which means names. That becomes important just by the fact that they're in exile and slave people. And the fact that God knows their names and recalls their names is important, because when you're an enslaved people, or when you're a prisoner in the prison system, or when you were brought into a Holocaust camp, you were given a number. And the opposite of that is a God who knows your name. So it's kind of important. Most of the time that the Hebrews would have been reading this book, they were in exile. So names becomes an important thing to remember. When you're in exile, he still knows your name, and he's still got a plan. So just a neat little cool thing. So let's read this little section, probably start Exodus chapter 4. Let's start in 18. Moses has already had his, I don't think I should be the one to do it, time with the Lord. And Jeffrey said he looked it up one time, and 7 times basically Moses is like, I don't think it should be me. And God's like, oh yeah, it's you. And eventually it's him and his spokesman, Aaron, his brother, who go to do this. First, we'll read it, and then I'll go through some things just to consider about the whole passage, and then we'll go from there. So Exodus chapter 4, verse 18, and we're going all the way through the difficult passage, which will take us through verse 26, right up to 27. So starting at 18, Carl, I usually have Russell read when he's here. Steve is a not as good substitute, so we'll let you give a try at it if you want. If you want to pick up in
18.
Exodus 4, verse 18, take it all the way through to 26,
Okay.
past 26, up to 27.
Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, let me go back, I pray, to my kinsmen in Egypt, and see whether they are still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. And the Lord said to Moses in Midian, go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead. So Moses took his wife and his sons and set them on an ass and went back to the land of Egypt, and in his hand Moses took the rod of God. And the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, See that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles which I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. And you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel, my firstborn son, and I say to you, let my son go that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay your firstborn son. At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. So he let him alone. Then it was that she said, you are a bridegroom of blood because of the circumcision.
Yeah, so there we are. I sent out a little email or Facebook message saying that we were going to look at that little section. And if I hadn't sent that email out, I probably would have completely backtracked, because once I started looking at it, a whole lot of people were not able to give a whole lot of insight into this. Some of the things to consider as we look at this passage, it's almost all pronouns. Like in verse 24, if you have Moses there, it's just a pronoun. There's no way to know whether it's talking about Moses or one of his sons, the older one, Gershom, or the younger one, Eliezer. There's no way to know. So the interpreters do their best to figure it out, and most of them think it was Moses, and they'll put it in there. But this is just a sea of pronouns. There isn't a real good, clear name thrown in there to make it really clear to us. Moses is the one recording this event, and he's very short on detail and explanation as to what's going on. So that's key to keep in mind, I think. Moses has been, and this is something I had to consider when I watched a movie about the Exodus, not the famous one with Charlton Heston, but another one. And it really made clear the fact that, so for 3 years, possibly, Moses is with or around his Hebrew mother. He's weaned. He goes off to the Egyptian daughter who had rescued him, pulled him out of the water. That's where his name comes from. And great compassion. And really the most amazing part of that is, if you really were just reading the story and you read that the Egyptian Pharaoh wanted all the Hebrew boys killed, and the person who happens to see that little ark floating in the water is the daughter of Pharaoh, the music would turn like dun dun dun, like the daughter of Pharaoh is probably going to kill the baby boy, but she pulls him out of the water, rescues him, and brings him into the family. Shows great compassion. So for 37 years, he's raised in an Egyptian household. Then he has to flee Egypt. And for 40 years, he's in a Midianite household under Jethro. So there's not a whole lot of Hebraic teaching, Hebrew understanding going on in his life when you really consider who Moses was. So that makes it very interesting background. Another thing it sets out in verse 24, there's various ways it's recorded, but God meets him, whoever him is, and would have killed him. So there's like a warning. There's like a merciful thing happening there, because obviously if God, the sovereign creator of the universe, decides he's going to kill you, there's not a whole lot of wonder how this is going to play out. If the sovereign creator of the universe decides there's going to be a death that night, there's going to be a death, and there's nothing any human being could do there. So there's a mercy in the wording that indicates there could be a change. That it's not set in stone just yet. Moses named his first boy Gershom. That means a stranger there, or an exile, or an alien, because he's in Midian, away from Egypt, away from his people, away from either his Egyptian people or his Hebrew people. He's away in any case. And that word bridegroom, the Hebrew word is sort of just like an in-law. It's used as in-law just as often as it's used for groom or bridegroom. So it's just an unusual word choice from Zipporah at that point. And that's just some of the background that I saw in that. Tell me what you saw in it that stood out to you, and then we can just share different insights as to what we saw going on there. Or it's a difficult passage, but what's First Timothy say? All Scripture is given for our edification, or so may this Scripture tonight, and I believe it will. God graciously will meet us, and this will be for our edification. We'll come away from this with a deeper love, a deeper understanding of God. So the floor is open. Anyone want to share, just looking at that passage, anything that comes to mind?
Well, just on what you said first, I think of Pharaoh's daughter. I've always thought of it like this. Yeah, it's a sign of that compassion that she had, but also it's a sign of how great God's plan is, because the one and only person that is going to be able to save Moses at that point is her. So it's just,
Wow, yeah.
there's nobody else in the kingdom of Egypt that Pharaoh's going to say, well, okay, since you love him, I'm going to let it go. Any other Egyptian is going to, his daughter, he's going to, oh, okay. And
Wow, yeah.
but then also, I'm thinking about, it just struck me as you were saying it, and I've never thought of it before, and maybe we should go into it more. Do you think being raised in the Egyptian household and being raised in the Midianite household makes him the ideal person to carry out what God's going to do, because he is not constrained by the customs and laws that have been learned by the Hebrews up until now. He is a totally malleable individual that God could shape exactly like he wants. There's no preconceived notions or anything going in. It's just everything. His full instruction doesn't come from what any man has taught him, what their faith means to them. His full instruction is from God and from God only, of what it means to be a follower of Yahweh.
Yeah. So you're saying it's kind of like Paul being
Yeah.
pulled away from all the people who could have explained something to him about being a follower of Yeshua, even though he had this tremendous Jewish background. He's pulled away, and he's out in the desert is where he learns quite a bit and goes into it. So yeah, I see what you're saying there. It's good.
Chuck, you were talking about the ambiguity of pronouns here.
Ton of them, yeah.
In verses 22, 23, God is talking about killing Pharaoh's eldest son. And then the ambiguity of the word him at the end of 24 leads me to believe that the him there is Moses's eldest son. Is that where that's headed?
I felt strongly to go in that direction after reading it over and over and hearing from different people about it, because his mission just before that is stated as you're going to go
Right.
and see this. So what would give you more compassion for the Egyptian people and prepare you to be an even better messenger, as Pete was saying. You're going in there with the heart of God, compassionately crying out to them, this is what it's going to cost you. And for you to have to endure a night where it looks like you're going to lose your firstborn son, then that's personal at that point. And you can really, the things we go through, we're much more compassionate about to others. So yeah, 100%. I agree with what you're saying there.
The Living Bible has a different interpretation of 26.
Okay.
Well, it's 25 and 26 combined.
Mhm.
It says, then Zipporah, his wife, took a flint knife and cut off the foreskin of her young son and threw it at Moses' feet, remarking disgustingly, what a blood-smeared husband you've turned out to be. That's a very different interpretation of bridegroom of the blood.
Yeah, I think, and putting the tone of voice disgustingly,
Right.
You're going way over translation at that point when you throw that in there. You have leaped way beyond translation at that point. You've decided what her heart was thinking.
Right.
I don't agree with that. Just because, picture the scene, if we're right about Gershom, she's seeing the life breath, because it says at the end there in 26, God let him go. So I'm assuming it was like a choking life breath coming out of the boy.
Right.
So she's seeing that situation. Something in her realizes, wait a minute, this is about that covenant thing. This is about that circumcision thing. Okay, we're going to do this now. All the intensity of that moment, and then to see him take a breath at that point, I don't know. You shouldn't probably put in disgustingly there. It was more like the overwhelming intensity of the moment. Just finally you collapse after such an intense encounter with the very God who's already uprooting your family and telling him, you're moving. So yeah, I wouldn't have thrown that in there, Living Bible. It probably wouldn't have went that far.
Do you want to hear the study note on 24 through
Yeah.
26? Because it kind of says what you just said.
Yeah.
Perhaps the statement that the Lord sought to put him to death expressed how the circumstances appeared to Moses and Zipporah. It was apparent to Zipporah what had to be done, and nothing is said about what would happen if she had failed that. Circumcision was performed in Egypt when boys were 14 years of age. However, circumcision on the 8th day had been commanded of Abraham as a sign of God's covenant. Moses' failure to circumcise his son shows that Moses had not been acting like a member of the covenant community, a serious offense. In contrast with the custom of Egypt, where a boy's circumcision was associated with coming into manhood, performing the circumcision on the 8th day of an infant's life would naturally have involved his mother, who would closely care for the infant. So it's a bond. It's something to help with that bond. To say not only the bond with God, but that's a symbol of the bond with God. So every Israelite wife and mother of a son would have thus been reminded of the covenant between God and Israel. Now, because Moses had neglected the circumcision of at least one of his sons, Zipporah suddenly was involved. If Moses was to speak for Abraham's God, who is in the process of keeping his covenant promises, Moses needed to observe that sign of that covenant.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I'm trying to picture the situation, and to me, Moses freezes, which he's the author of what we're reading, and he doesn't put a whole lot in there. It's only 3 verses, and it's very convoluted. So Moses freezes, Zipporah takes action, and Zipporah tosses it at him at the end of it, just out of the fact that the intensity of the moment has passed, her son is breathing again, and we're done. We made it through that very intense, overwhelming time. And just it rose up in my heart the beauty of the intercession of a godly wife. Like she saw that something needed to happen here, and she took the action that needed to be taken, and it released possibly Gershom and definitely Moses, and allowed everything to progress. Everything just goes on from there. Like, okay, that's done, and now we go on, and there's no further mention of it. There's nothing else is said about it, and Moses goes on to do what he was called to do. We don't hear about Zipporah. Did she go back at this point? Did she go back later? It would be a question as to when she went back. She does come to visit Moses later, but that indicates at some point she went back to Midian.
Now, the Amplified reads, "Now it had happened at the lodging place that the Lord met Moses and sought to kill him, making him deathly ill because he had not circumcised one of his sons. Then Zipporah took a flint knife and cut off the foreskin of her son and threw it at Moses' feet and said, 'Indeed, you are a husband of blood to me.' So he let Moses, he being God, big he. So he let Moses alone to recover. At that time, Zipporah said, 'You are a husband of blood because of the circumcision.'"
Yeah. So Gershom would have been older, and it would have been bloodier since he was older. So that possibly explains that also. And her need to say that twice. I mean, is everybody married here? They're going to say it twice. That's all there is to
Whether
it.
it need to or not,
They're going to say it at least twice. We might have to edit that later.
whether they need to or not. One thing before we go on, and that's something that I find interesting. With one of the study notes, and it makes sense, is whenever he's referring and whenever he tells him that you're going to go to Pharaoh and say, to let my son go, referring to Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I guess something at that time, a custom at that time, whenever kings are interacting, rulers are interacting with one another, that son is used to show a superiority over another king. So if Pharaoh's going to the king of Midian or whatever, he would refer to him as son to try to show that superiority.
Oh, I see.
So with him saying you're to let, that son reference going in is something that would have immediately be recognized by not only Pharaoh, but also all the people standing around in Pharaoh's court. It's going to be kind of I can't believe he said that,
Right.
And then the hardening of the heart, and I didn't know this to read this, in Egyptian culture, they preferred that someone's heart be hardened. And that comes from, one, with their look on death, because whenever, we look at it as a negative, which it is, we look on the negative on it, but according to Egyptians, whenever they say hardening of the heart, you want your heart to be hardened at someone's death because you intercede for that person at their death, because the living intercede for the dead. And then also it was considered a person was also used to describe the ideal man in public life who, because of his hard heart, would always appear firm and unshaken, which was a common thing with that society. And so whenever Pharaoh's heart becomes hard, they're seeing, okay, Moses telling me you're going to harden his heart. They're kind of looking at that at first whenever Moses, whenever it's coming out, whenever they know that God is going to harden his heart, they're thinking, well, that's a good thing. But then they see that he is far from cool and collected, that he's losing it, with the hardening of the heart. So,
Yeah, one wording of it in Hebrew put it as he strengthened his heart. So he actually was strengthening Pharaoh's heart to be what it normally would have been. Like, I'm the king, I'm Pharaoh, I'm not going to move. So that's the other way that they had that going on. Kimberly, we did make it to Exodus chapter 4. Moses being sent to Pharaoh, and the incident at the inn where Zipporah has to do a quick little surgery there, circumcision the foreskin of her son. And that's where we were at, working our way through there. So Gershom definitely would have needed to be circumcised, and with Moses naming him basically a stranger, an exile, an alien, he may have just, okay, here I am in Midian. Here's my family, here's my firstborn son, but we're exiles here. So he may have just let what he knew Abraham had commanded as part of the sign of the covenant, he might have just let it go. But he apparently made the story known so that Zipporah was aware that this is a covenant act that needed done. And with her father being a priest in Midian, a lot of the commentators said she would have been aware of and capable of the act of circumcision. So,
but in Midian, the circumcision wasn't practiced until the marriage.
Right. Yeah. But she would have been aware of the actual how to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not hard.
Right. So she would have, both in Midian and in Egypt, and I think some other ancient cultures, it was saved for manhood, not the 8th day. But I did find out a neat thing about the 8th day is it's a spike in your vitamin K, which allows for clotting, right?
Correct.
So that's kind of a neat thing. God had that all figured out way ahead of time, and we found it out via blood work. And nowadays we, I guess, inject vitamin K so that no matter what day you do it on, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, there is a good clotting factor. But it is kind of neat that on the 8th day after birth, there is a spike in vitamin K and your blood clots better. So apparently God knows what he's doing. That's always a lovely thing to find out.
Did you see my post on Facebook today? Just as a question.
I do not think I did.
It was a cartoon about physics and Noah in the ark. You'll have to look it up.
All right. Will do. Jeffrey, you were talking.
Well, I never picked it up before that quite early on in the story. It's already made clear that this is what the Lord says. Israel is my firstborn son. Let my son go. But you refused. And so I will kill your firstborn son. It's verse 23. And then after this, a whole bunch of things unfold, but he's already making it clear what's going to happen.
Yeah, he's outside of time. So I've never had a big problem with that because he is outside of time. He is able to tell us what will happen ahead of time.
Yeah.
And I do like the fact that one of the Hebrew words used for hardening his heart is basically, I'll strengthen his heart to be what his heart would normally be. Since he considers himself a god, I'll just let that natural misunderstanding that causes him to put himself on an equal footing with me, I'll just let that be what it is. And pride is a very, very, very bad thing when it comes to keeping us from God's heart. Humility allows in so much beauty in life, and pride blocks.
Yeah, that was the main thing that struck me. I didn't really realize that God, he strengthened, he hardened Pharaoh's heart. But in general, I haven't done a lot of Bible studies, but in general, that is a choice we all have when we have a situation, suffering, whatever it is before us. Do we harden our heart, or do we soften and have compassion and
Right.
care about the situation? So yeah, just personally, that's kind of what struck me.
Yeah. And that word, she threw it at his feet. That it was apparently she striking, and that's the same word that they used when they would strike the doorway at Passover with the blood. Same exact word there. So a definite connection between the two events, and yet another connection between the firstborn, the passing over, the blood. You know, it's just the Word of God is positively amazing when you really don't just rake it, but you actually go in there with a deep shovel and you start digging in pretty deep. It's just amazing how it all comes together and fits together and beautiful, and obviously well thought out ways, I guess is the best way to put it. There's probably a much better way to put it, but that's all I got right now. God went before us in putting this together and how he did. It's amazing. It's definitely one of those stories where we see God as king and as father, and the tension between that, you know. He's king, this needs to happen, but he's fatherly. He's trying to show mercy and give warning. And the only person who gives a warning when you're going into battle is somebody who basically has overwhelming force and a guaranteed victory, right? You don't give a warning in a typical battle situation. You only give a warning in a battle situation if you know I'm about to crush you. Here are your options, you know, and I'm going to do it one way or the other. If you don't, here are your options. So the warning comes from someone who has overwhelming power.
Are we sure that she touched Moses or threw it at Moses? Even?
No, there's no.
Yeah, again, ambiguity of pronoun.
Yeah, the pronoun is just a pronoun. Yeah.
Because I'm like you reading several commentaries on this.
Right.
And it's saying the his in 25 is actually Gershom's again.
Yeah, it's a sea of pronouns, so you can't argue with anybody who's speculating about this passage, because it's just a big fat sea of pronouns, and there's no. You have to go to the Lord and work through it and see what he's telling you or how you're getting something out of it. What I got out of it when I worked through it was Gershom and the intercession of a godly wife who knew what to do and handled the situation. And just the understanding of, here's your firstborn. He's not a part of the covenant yet. This needs to be handled before you go in with the authority in Pharaoh's court to say, hey, let my firstborn son go. And your firstborn son is not even really part of the covenant. So that made sense to me. And that's how I would have went with it. And that Gershom was the one whose life breath was being squeezed out of him at that point, and Zipporah, seeing that, knew that action had to be taken. That understanding of it made sense to me by the grace of God. And that's the direction I went with it. And it benefited my heart looking at it that way. So that was good confirmation to me that that's a good way to look at it. But you can't argue with any other point of view because it is just pronoun city. You have parked yourself and you are in pronoun city in this little passage.
Okay, so am I all caught up in the general discussion?
As far as we can ever catch anybody up, you are.
That's fair. So I always look at this little story here as one last time where Moses is really stuck between identity as an Egyptian and identity as a Hebrew. And we do find with most of his stories, he kind of has this, I don't know where I belong, but I know that I should be over there. And it seems like this is the moment where God's really coming between and showing the differences between his Israelite people and the people of Egypt, or who identify with, not just the land, but the religion, the Pharaoh, and everything else. And so God's really making like the solid line for everybody to see. And Moses still hasn't decided. And his wife is like, I'm not risking our family over your indecision. We're in. I decided.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that would not be out of line with the ancient Jewish matriarchs and patriarchs. The women did come in and make decisions with their men. So
Yeah. I agree. She took action.
yeah.
Is Zipporah mentioned again in Exodus?
Coming to visit one time later.
Okay.
Yeah. And that perfectly lines up with something Pete had said earlier, which I probably didn't fully catch you up on, but Moses was the perfect man for the job because he's holding in tension his compassion for Pharaoh's house. I mean, Pharaoh's daughter had rescued him and shown great compassion and raised him. So he's holding in tension the compassion he has for Pharaoh's house and the compassion he has for these Hebrews who he's just getting to know that he's a part of them. And wow, here's my brother Aaron. And wow, isn't this a cool thing? So he's the perfect man for the job because he has compassion for both and he is in tension. Like it's not just, I'm just going to go there and tell them what to do. I'm God's man of faith and power for the hour, and I'm just going to lay it on the line. He is in tension. There is a perfect work of God, and the perfect man is being called to come and play out this whole scenario. I really saw that as I was looking through this, and I totally agree that his upbringing, who he is, how he spent all this time either in an Egyptian household or a Midianite household, and then just sort of coming into an understanding of that he's called to be the leader of the Hebrews, which he kind of had an understanding of that earlier, but he sort of went off in a little vigilante justice moment, and that didn't go so well. And then when Pharaoh found out he was judging, yeah, that didn't go so well. So he had to run away. But 40 years in the desert and the second call, he is the perfect man for the job, whether he knows it or not. And apparently he doesn't know it. Which
This
is
could
good.
definitely be like a summation or a pivot point where we are watching the fullness of this story. Even the phrase that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, but that was already the direction Pharaoh was going in. So it's almost like God empowered him to continue with what he'd chosen for Pharaoh, who they weren't technically on the same side. So Moses here is like wavering in the middle, and all he has to do is say, like, I'm in, like, I'm in, I'm leaving behind Egypt, I'm leaving Midian, I'm like in, whatever that means for this future, I can't see, I'm in. That's all he had to say. and God would empower him, and did after this. But he's still on this like wavering. And I think his wife has to, you would say, cut the cord, but in this case, had to cut the skin.
Right.
That was, the middle ground for what to choose. And she's saying, look, all of us have paid a cost, Moses. Just decide.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Good stuff. Well, let's go on to 27 then. Joe, you want to pick up there? 27?
Sure. Let me switch section. Let me switch books.
All right.
I'm in the literal translation. It's a little clunky.
Oh, yeah.
27. Now the Lord said to Aaron, go and meet Moses in the wilderness. So he went and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. Moses told Aaron everything the Lord had sent him to say and about all the signs he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of the Israelites. Aaron repeated everything the Lord had said to Moses and performed the signs before the people. The people believed, and when they heard that the Lord had paid attention to them and that he had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshipped. So God told Moses, Moses told Aaron, Aaron told the elders. Is that how it went?
That's how it's playing out right there, huh? That Moses is earlier pleading that I don't want to be the one to talk. I'm not good at talking. I'm a terrible speaker at one point, I think he says. Is met with, okay, I got a spokesman for you. I'll go get your brother Aaron. And here is where he actually meets up with Aaron. Because Aaron has to hear about go meet Moses too. I mean, God has to speak to Aaron too to come out into the desert and meet Moses as he's coming in, so that they're on the same page. If he's going to be the spokesperson, he's got to know what all is going on. And really, how much time had Aaron and Moses been together at this point? Had they ever been together? Was this... Those are interesting questions, I think. They're not really answered by anything that I see in the Bible as far as would they have ever been able to or even wanted to spend time together. Was the separation long and consistent?
We're taught growing up that Moses gets Aaron as his mouthpiece. The way we're taught is just simply that, as a mouthpiece for Moses. But then this clearly states that it's not just a mouthpiece for Moses, but also a guide in a history and religion that he is now entering that he is not used to. Okay,
Right.
So it's truly a guide. And this one refers me to 18:8, which if you go back into like 5, it's just a beautiful. So we get the guide here, Aaron, coming to Moses. Then 18, starting in verse 5, Moses' father-in-law Jethro, along with Moses' wives and sons, came to meet him in the wilderness where he was camped at the mountain of God. He sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons. Now, the parallel here is just beautiful. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and then kissed him. They asked each other how they had been and went into the tent. Moses recounted to his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and all the hardships that confronted them on the way, and how the Lord delivered them. So we get that full circle there in 18:8 of Aaron coming in and being the guide, and Moses coming to his full spiritual maturity here at the end, and coming back to Jethro and saying, and it being Moses, taking Aaron's spot in that. I just think that's really poetic.
And still having the humility to bow to his father-in-law.
Yeah.
That he's the leader of a couple million people at this point. he goes out, sees his father-in-law, and bows. You know, that's a beautiful thing in a male leader.
Maybe not that hard. It's not like Israel made it easy for him being the leader of them.
No, he wasn't. You're
I'm
right.
sure he's thinking
They
about
kept
that
him
a couple
humble, right?
times.
They did a good job of keeping him humble.
But also that they chose someone who wasn't a polished speaker.
Right.
I mean, God chose.
Yeah.
But and it's a bit like Apostle Paul, even acknowledges that himself.
Yeah. He's great in letters, but he's not such a great speaker. The one congregation told him,
Yeah.
Your letters are forceful, but your speaking is not.
Oh my.
Not a great, but he wanted that Christ crucified.
Right.
Was nice.
Yeah, amen. Yeah. Pete's down there doing his 1 and 2 week tryout down at New Meadow Run, and he was just smiling there when we mentioned about that.
Pete.
Well, why I was smiling, I was sitting here like cleaning out some papers out of my Bible. I did a cleaning last week. And I'm looking through some more that I missed, and I was seeing what I wanted to keep. And I don't even know what Bible study this was from, but different things I had here. And like one thing I asked, it was something with the prodigal. We're talking there. And then one, did I ever thank him for putting me a keister? But there's a note, and I don't know who said it that night, but I didn't write down who said this. But the note is actually, and it just goes right in with what you're saying with the polished speaker. Being a pastor isn't necessarily bringing the word. A lot of it is having a heart for the people.
Wow. Yeah, amen.
So I don't know who said that night. But
That's a pastor. A pastor's heart.
Yeah.
Shepherd.
Definitely.
Yep. We need more of that.
100% agree with that statement. Whoever said it.
might have been you.
Nah.
Yeah, you're right.
Sounds too
Say
wise.
that wise.
Pete, were you happy with how things went, more or less? Or is that a bad question?
It's hard. I have no regrets of what I said, so therefore I'm happy because it must have been what I was supposed to say. Put it that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I had a couple people said they liked it. I'm not really caring that at this point, but that if I would have walked out of there wishing I would have said something more or regretting that I said something, I would worry, but I wasn't regretting anything I said, and it seemed right, so I'm just going to accept that it was right. I'm trying not to think about that. I do that too often, worrying about how it was. And really, for some reason, I'm not, so it must have been half decent.
Well, it's interesting that Paul, who did a lot of speaking, said to the Corinthians, I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. He tried to focus on Jesus, and I'm sure you do the same thing.
Well, one thing, whenever I first, applied and they called and asked me about going down, and I didn't know how to answer. It wasn't my answer really, and they said, well, do you have any questions for us? And they said, ask me why I'm applying. And they were wanting to see my interest in it. And I felt compelled to tell them that I didn't even know I felt this way until I was asked. I felt compelled to tell them that. And I said, I don't mean this to sound the way it sounds really bad. It's not something you want to say in a job interview. But I said, well, honestly, I could care less whether I get the position or not. I'm interested in coming down. I'm interested in you and giving you the word that He gives me to give you. And if nothing else, I'm going to make some new friends out of it and have a place that I can come and fellowship. And that's really the way I felt about it from the very beginning. And it was really strange that I had the nerve to say that. God gave me the nerve to actually say it like that. But it's been beautiful with the whole experience because all I got to say now is what God's telling me to say, and I have no worries on any consequences that come from it, as long as I'm saying what he tells me to. It's going to work out one way or another. So it's been a beautiful experience.
Yeah. It's a nice little church down there.
It really is. I didn't put anybody completely to sleep, so that's a good thing.
Ah,
Good thing.
Better record than John.
Who's innocently upstairs at a board meeting and not here to defend himself.
I just have to say it for Carl and Jeff's thing, because I don't think I ever told him. I actually, you know how I tease John about him putting me to sleep all the time? One time, this was like last fall down in Keisterville, I am preaching. I literally fell asleep at the podium. I nodded off for maybe about 10, 15 seconds. I put myself to sleep.
wow.
And people actually caught it. A couple of them. I thought something.
That was a
on
dramatic
the dial.
pause.
Amazing.
The dramatic pause.
Did you ever know Ken Van Sickle, who used to be the pastor?
No, but my mom did. My mom was really good friends with him. So.
I met him once. Dane took me up once to meet him.
Has he passed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
He used to drive heavy equipment for Spring Valley.
Oh,
So
and then passed it on the weekend.
Yeah.
Then he became a pastor. After
Okay.
that.
Oh, after that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jeff, he still drove the heavy equipment. He owned a construction company and worked there, and still pastored on the weekends.
Busy man. So there was kind of a neat little section there that Joe read for us. The people believed when they heard that Adonai had remembered the people of Israel, seen how they were oppressed. There's just a real power in that. I guess there's a real sigh of relief, right? When you realize that God remembered you and sees you and is sending somebody to help you. You know, they bowed their heads and worshiped. That's just a beautiful beginning to what was going to be a rocky time coming up there, but it had a very beautiful beginning. I don't think we need to go too far in chapter 5, but let's dive into 5:1 through 5. Joe, I guess I'll let you do that again if you want, or we could have.
Sure.
All right.
Later, Moses and Aaron went in and said to Pharaoh, "This is what Yahweh, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival for me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh responded, "Who is Yahweh, that I should obey him by letting Israel go? I don't know anything about Yahweh, and besides, I will not let Israel go." Then they answered, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go on a 3-day trip into the wilderness, so that we may sacrifice to Yahweh our God, or else he may strike us with a plague or sword." The king of Egypt said to them, "Moses and Aaron, why are you causing the people to neglect their work? Get to your work." Pharaoh also said, "Look, the people of the land are so numerous, and you would stop them from working."
And it's interesting because one of the many things I was listening to said that they changed their tactic there. Like they described God as Yahweh, and Pharaoh didn't recognize that. He didn't have any such God in his pantheon of gods that they worshipped and dealt with over there. But then the second time they come, they're like, "Hey, we have to go, otherwise he'll strike us with a plague and a sword." And that kind of a God Pharaoh could relate to, and he doesn't really question him about God the second time around, because he could kind of relate to a God who would strike you with a plague or with the sword, and he just was angry about the fact trying to take his slaves away from the work that they were doing. So it's kind of interesting that there was like a different tact that they were using with Pharaoh that second time around there.
I thought it was interesting that he said that God might put plagues in the sword upon us, when the truth was it was going to be upon the Egyptians anyways. But they didn't want it to sound like a threat. So they're like, it could happen to us since he's our God and we're not obeying him.
Yeah,
But I think he already knew it was really going to be on them.
right.
See, I don't take it that he's ignorant about Yahweh. And quite honestly, he wouldn't be, because the Israelites have been there long enough. He's going to know who Yahweh is.
Okay.
So this is a total, who's Yahweh? I don't care. Please.
Yeah, what's he done so far?
Your God hasn't gotten you out of Egypt yet. I'm more powerful from God than he is. Kind of.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. What's he done so far?
I also like that they're just like, let us go into a 3-day trip and we'll be back. I mean, like,
Right. It's a minor request here,
yeah,
like a 3-day weekend. That's all we're asking for.
just a Friday holiday,
It's a minor request, but yet at the same time, it's a subtle dig at Pharaoh's non-authority. It's that request is just ludicrous. I mean, he's not gonna let any Israelite go and be gone for any amount of day to get wherever his work. So I mean, it's really just a little bit of sarcasm there. I love it.
Jeff, you want to pick up in verse 6?
Verse 6.
Yeah.
That same day, Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and the foreman in charge of the people. You are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw, but require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They are lazy. That is what they are, crying out, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Make the work harder for the men so that they keep working and pay no attention to lies. Then the slave drivers and the foreman went out and said to the people, this is what Pharaoh says. I will not give you any more straw. Go and get your own straw wherever you can find it, but your work will not be reduced at all. And so the people scattered all over Egypt to gather stubble to use for straw, and the slave drivers kept pressing them, saying, complete your work required of you for each day, just as when you had straw.
Which is impossible. I mean,
Yeah.
You've got to keep making what you were making before when it was all there in front of you to make it. Only now you've got to use part of your time to go gather the materials to make it. And it's impossible. So, yeah, Pharaoh's setting the bar too high, and there's no way it's going to work. There's no way they can continue to do that. It's an impossible task that he's asking. The foremen of the people of Israel, whom Pharaoh's slave masters had appointed to be over them, were flogged and asked, why haven't you fulfilled your quota of bricks yesterday and today, as you did formerly? Then the foreman of the people of Israel came and complained to Pharaoh, why are you treating your servants this way? No straw is given to your servants, yet they keep telling us to make bricks. And now your servants are being flogged, but the fault lies with your own people. Lazy, Pharaoh retorted. You're just lazy. That's why you say, let us go and sacrifice to Adonai. Get going now, get back to work. No straw will be given to you, and you will still deliver the full amount of bricks. When they said, you are not to reduce your daily production quota of bricks, the foreman of the people of Israel could see that they were in deep trouble. So whatever had occurred way back there at the end of chapter 4, where the people were comforted and they believed God had seen their trials and they bowed their head and worshiped him, was about to exit stage right because they were being put under this heavy weight, impossible weight, flogged.
Well, it's setting up a huge message for Israel too. You know, we always look at this story on, you know, the deliverance from Israel, but he needs to set it up like this. He needs to, because, and historically, if you look at it, the bondage, yes, they were there and they were in bondage. They were technically slaves. But if you look at historical records on the treatment, it wasn't horrendous. I mean, it's not like they were beating and killing people every day. They still were fed well. They still, you know, to keep a good slave, you want that slave to be strong and healthy. You're going to give them stuff. And you're going to, you know, you're going to help out. You're going to help out enough to get that slave to do what you want, to keep them healthy, to keep them working.
And they multiplied incredibly while they were there.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Something was going okay.
So at this point, it's not only, you know, it's not only the lessons that he's teaching Egypt, it's this lesson that he's teaching the Israelites. Okay, you think it's bad now. I listened. I know, I've seen your hardship. I've seen where you're at. But it's not just, boom, I'm going to snap my hands and make everything great. You're going to see how hard it could really be. And where you're at your lowest, you're at your, where you can't take it anymore. You're at your breaking point. You're at rock bottom. And then that's when I'm going to step in to show you how powerful I am, to show you what I can really do. So it's a lesson for Israel, too, to see his true power, his true glory, what is really possible from their God. At this point, they hadn't seen yet. They're not witnessing the full power of God. Now they're seeing him in his full power. They can see what he can truly do.
Now, is it possible that you got a little bit of your Catholicism showing there, Pete?
Probably.
Joe shaking his head.
Going on. No, I really think it's a lesson to be learned, and this is more or less not more of the Catholicism. This is more of an addiction thing. But if you were delivered up before you could see the true horror, the true hardness. I mean, look at what they went through it, and even then, seeing what they saw, the hardships they faced, and even then they were still buttheads once they got to the desert, still turned, But if you're going in and you're getting released from this, from a fairly bit of ease, it makes it that much more powerful. It makes that lesson learn so much better. It makes you take it more to heart than you would if it's the harder it gets, the harder he's bringing you out. It's you know what I'm saying? I'm floundering. You know what I mean, though. Yeah.
If you cry out to God because you feel like you're at the absolute end of yourself, as an entire culture of people, you feel so entrapped, so at the end of yourself, you cry out to God, he answers, and you're so impressed, like you almost thought God was maybe dead or made up or fairy tale or myth, and he answers. Then he's going to be like, now I'm going to show you what rock bottom really looks like. That sounds like Catholicism. Okay, it's possible also a secondary whimsical mommy hold your hand view is possible that they were slowly coming out of Egypt while in Egypt. They lost the straw to make the bricks, and they don't have a relationship with God. They didn't know they can say, God, where do we go to get straw? Or can you bring us some straw? They only know Egypt has taken over and been this abusive provider, and they have themselves who are in this horrible victim mentality and trauma mentality, like, gotta make daddy happy or else he's gonna come home drunk and angry, you know? And that's like their whole relationship for generations. And God's like, I'm slowly gonna take you out of that. And they think it's gonna kill them, but it doesn't. They find the straw. And the next challenge that comes, they think it's gonna kill them. And they find how to do that. And little by little, they start learning who they are and remembering who their God is. Just saying, that's a mommy hold my hand point of view instead of Catholicism.
No, I like that. And so and also just to, okay, just so I'm getting it completely. So it's also a lesson of you don't have to. I don't have to be that. Let's go with your thing there. I don't have to be that abusive father. Right? Is that what you're getting at too? You know, that's also a lesson there. I don't have to be that abusive father like you're experiencing with the Egyptians. Like you're saying, it's all you have to do is ask. You don't have to suffer like you did. You know, I'm not that abusive father. That's not the God I am.
Could this also be a foretaste of Moses in the wilderness is going to have to do this a lot? Yeah. Where he's going to say, we're going to do this for good, and it's going to look bad, and you're going to complain, and I'm going to go to God, and God's going to give us the answer. This
and
is a model.
I do think one of the reasons these early Israelites were so complainy was because that they didn't have relationship gods in Egypt. It was do for me or else. And I'm not going to tell you if I'm happy or not. I'm just going to be angry or more angry. So learning to have a relationship with God instead of saying, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? Saying, God, I'm thirsty and I don't feel like we can keep going. God, I don't understand how this new culture works. Can you explain it to me? They didn't know the relationship. They were like very retarded in God relationships. And they just needed healing from this traumatic experience, if you will. And I am saying that because I have been taking these classes and stuff. But however, it's a very good point of view to look at it so that we don't repeat it. Because if we believe that they had to be brought down a couple pegs by God, then we're going to believe we can keep going the way we're going until God brings us down a couple of pegs. And we're not going to build relationship because how we read the Bible is going to dictate how we live our lives.
It's definitely key and a good point that they're just learning. They're interacting with God. They're just learning what this relationship is going to look like. So yeah, that's a key thing.
This is why you can't miss Tuesdays, Clint.
Yeah.
This is also a nice, like, I think it gives Pharaoh a little bit of, this is how he hardens his heart, because he goes, fine, you want to do, you want to go on a 3-day weekend, I'm going to make you work harder. And then God sends a little plague, like, you know, the water turning to blood. We can handle that. That's no problem.
My magicians can do that.
My magicians can do that, right? You know, so like, I'm just going to make the work harder on you, and I'm just going to make the work hard. You know, it's just, this is how God's hardening Pharaoh's heart over time as well.
And that was good about slowly coming out of Egypt while you're still in Egypt. Like, maybe Egypt's not such a great place. Maybe we really do need to be brought up and out of here. So that was a good point.
Yeah, and even at the end there, where it says Moses turned again to the Lord and said, "O Lord, why hast thou done evil to this people?" Like he's not farther ahead, although he's a leader. He's supposed to be the leader. He's like just there with him, you know.
Yeah.
I
Go ahead
gotta
and
go
read
back
that.
to God and find out what's going on.
Yeah, go ahead and read that 20 to the end.
Yeah. 20?
Yeah, verse 20.
Okay. They met Moses and Aaron, who were waiting for them, as they came forth from Pharaoh. And they said to them, "The Lord look upon you and judge, because you have made us offensive in the sight of Pharaoh and his servants, and have put a sword in their hands to kill us." Then Moses turned again to the Lord and said, "O Lord, why hast thou done evil to this people? Why didst thou ever send me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he has done evil to this people, and thou hast not delivered thy people at all."
And you haven't rescued your people at all. Exclamation point.
Yeah, so just like sticking to the plan, going back to the drawing board, so to speak, As he said earlier, God's going to harden the heart of Pharaoh. It's going to take more than just you telling him once.
Right. Yeah.
To get through.
In case you didn't know, Kim is my rudder. She keeps me on course.
Can you repeat that louder? I only heard Kim.
I said, Kim is my rudder. She keeps me on course. And I don't say that jokingly. I say that affectionately.
I would say she's more your keel. She keeps you from tipping over.
That's even better. And I do say that affectionately.
Go ahead and pick up there, Joe, in chapter 6.
I thought we weren't getting far into chapter 5.
For some reason, I'm drawn to go further.
All right. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for under compulsion he will not only let them go, but under compulsion he will drive them out of his land." Then God spoke further to Moses and said to him, "I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty, El Shaddai, but by my name, Lord, I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as strangers. And I have also heard the groaning of the sons of Israel, whom the Egyptians have enslaved, and I have faithfully remembered my covenant with Abraham. Therefore, say to the children of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will free you from their bondage. I will redeem you and rescue you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. Then I will take you for my people, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who redeemed you and brought you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land which I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. Woo. And you have the promise of my changeless omnipotence and faithfulness. Ooh, that was a good little. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
According to the notes I have here, this is where he really starts revealing himself as Yahweh.
There's an interesting transition in there I hadn't noticed before. Yeah.
He says, let's see, I appeared to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob as
El Shaddai.
Yeah. But by my name, Yahweh, I did not make myself known to them. Anyway, I just, in broad strokes, I just find it thrilling that God progressively reveals himself to his people. And it's not all at once here, all through the Bible, he's revealing himself to more clearly. And yeah.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I got out of tonight was we need to be a little more gentle with them. They're just learning who he is, you know. And it's one thing to say he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but that was hundreds of years ago. We've been in Egypt 400 years by now.
Yeah.
Pharaoh has forgot there ever was a Joseph at this point. I guess just the key to be gentle with new believers, gentle with people who are just beginning to understand who God is, you know, and portray him accurately as a loving father, as a caring. Yeah, that's good stuff.
And in a certain way to be gentle on ourselves. It's so easy to beat up on ourselves, become exasperated and intolerant of ourselves, you know.
I think verse 9 underlines all what Kim said.
Okay.
Moses told this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to them because of their impatience and despondency and because of their forced labor. They still didn't have any relationship with God and knowing his heart.
They were discouraged, overwhelmingly discouraged, and the slavery was becoming more cruel.
Right.
And get out there, get your own straw, or you're going to be flogged and have the same amount of bricks. It's giving somebody an impossible task and then flogging them when they don't do the impossible task.
Yeah.
If you can't see how that would be discouraging, you haven't ever operated under that before.
Hey, wait a minute. Isn't that what we do in the church?
Oh. Just to the past.
Straighten up and fly right.
Yeah, be aware that that's never going to lead to a good place. I mean, they're so overwhelmingly discouraged they can't hear.
You know, I say that in jest, but I really do think there's a history of performance-based acceptance in the church. You know, we expect people to live as though they're completely transformed and conformed to the image of Christ when they're not, or when they're in the process of that transformation. And, you know, when the minute that they slip or step out of line, man, we just want to tell them exactly how badly they've let everyone down. I mean, we're getting better. I really do.
Yeah.
God is really doing a work, but historically, that's been normal in a lot of settings, and it's not been helpful.
When it's historical, it's not just a habit you have to change. At that point, it is generational trauma.
Yeah.
You do have to go into a spiritual place to heal that and to declare this will not continue. And maybe I can't heal it, but God, I'm declaring this does not continue. Break the trauma, heal the wounds. And when you do pray those prayers, it's very much like what Israel's experiencing. It gets worse and it's hard, and you stand there in it because you did pray that prayer. You did say, God, come rescue us. And he did answer. And you have to wait for that, or you have to hold it as long as you can.
And somehow to see the sin in yourself, like if someone falls, you know, not to judge them, you know, we're not supposed to judge, but to have compassion and put yourself there, you know, with them.
I'll go ahead and give another spoiler alert because apparently I jumped ahead earlier and didn't mean to. But in this story, we see Jethro come to be a help to Moses. He's Moses' father-in-law, and he's outside the circumstance, and he's able to give this outside mentor point of view. I think he's able to bring a sort of perspective and healing that everybody who's under this Israel Hebrew slave mentality can't see. And he really does bring something healthy, and that's something that we need in our own situations, whether as individuals or as a church gathering.
That's the value of the new person coming in and really listening to what they have to say, I guess, right? What are you seeing when you come into our body? Having the humility to ask them and let them sort of, I didn't really feel very welcome or, whatever. And don't get offended by that, but try and become a more better reflection of the amazing, merciful God we serve.
We definitely have the benefit of books and thousands of authors and resources that Israel possibly could not have had in their situation. But
Right. Yeah.
We do have lots of resources available, and I love that so very much. Of course, some of them are better for the compost pile than the bookshelf. But again, with Jethro, God had already prepared this man. He knew about rituals. He knew about guiding many, many people. He knew about having to stand up front and take the hard blows. And he was able to guide Moses because of that. I mean, how perfect that Moses should end up there with that family of all places when he's in this sabbatical part of his life.
Yeah, I think the bowing when Jethro came to visit him shows a real precious relationship there, that you took care of me at the lowest point of my life and gave me a job and hope and a family. The humility and the gratitude is a very good thing in Moses. That part of his character is a beautiful thing.
And it continues, it continues. Yeah. Well, I have to honestly say I never got so much out of this little passage we've looked at tonight.
Yeah, it's a blessing to have all these voices around to
Yeah.
fill it out and make it come alive even more.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
You're going to make John curious, and now he's going to want to see your notes, Chuck.
Yeah, well, they're pretty ugly. I don't know how.
We're recording this for a reason. He can go.
Yeah, we record for a reason now, because summarizing it would be difficult. Any idea where Gretchen's going next week, where we can be preparing, or she's gonna?
She has a couple of things on midwifery that she wanted to talk about.
Excellent.
I believe one from Exodus and one from Revelation. So
Very good. Very good.
I love your wife, Joe.
Yeah, she's in charge next week, so it'll be a great weekend.
I didn't catch that. Is she going to be here?
God willing, Gretchen will be here leading our little gathering.
Yeah.
and I think she connects it even through Matthew.
Wow.
Like she told me the whole thing, and that was months ago. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be a good time, I think.
All right.
But she did say, she told me it's gonna be very short, and I'm gonna have everybody contribute. I said, well, if it's anything like this week, Chuck does that a lot.
Yeah, we started out with 3 verses this week, so you don't need a
And
whole lot.
Not a lot of background on
Yeah.
that 3 verses.
Just put it out there on the table and let the chips fall where they may.
Well, tell Gretchen we're eager.
Yeah.
Oh, I've kind of cajoled her into doing this. I kind of twisted her arm into doing this. She wasn't real excited about it, but I voluntold her that she had to do it.
Voluntold is a good thing. They do that at the Bruderhof all the time. Pete's going to close us out with joy. Pete, you.
The other Pete, his brother Pete.
Yeah, the other Pete.
You just got voluntold.
Well, I'm just wondering, honestly, if Joe realizes that, how long have you been married, Joe?
We've been married. It'll be 17 years this May. We've been together 22 years now.
And in 22 years, you don't realize that you tell Gretchen to do anything yet. You still haven't learned that lesson.
Well, I kind of went backwards and told Chuck that Gretchen has something to say, and Chuck invited Gretchen to say. So
He did.
I
use
circumnavigated that one, Peter.
Yeah, you did circumnavigate. Good word.
Father God, we praise your name. We thank you. I thank you for this group that you've assembled on Tuesday nights to help us all grow together, to help us all grow to know and have a deeper understanding of you. You are so big. You are an amazing God. Thank you that you care enough for us. That you seek us, and you seek to give us the knowledge to grow closer to you. As we close tonight, I pray that you continue to speak to our hearts. You can continue to give us the wisdom and knowledge to know your heart. I ask that you put in all of our paths as we go out, put in our paths ways that we can glorify your name and just tell everyone how wonderful our God is. In your name I pray.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone. Recording stopped.